For your homework for 7-2, you're going to be using rectangle sections, and this is very rarely used, but we're going to practice it anyway. In the first problem, the numbers are 46 times 73, and they've given you this example, but we're going to draw this together here. The easiest thing to do is to think about drawing a big rectangle first, and then you split your rectangle down into smaller rectangles. This rectangle here should be the biggest one. Then you take apart your numbers here. So 46 is 40 and 6. The bigger number goes with a bigger rectangle. And 73 is 70 and 3. The order of those doesn't matter. You could put the 70 and the 3 on the left side and the 40 and the 6 on the top. It doesn't matter. Now, if you take what we practiced yesterday and you say, oh, okay, I have 4 times 7 is 28, and then I have 2 zeros, that goes in the first box. Then I'm going to go to the next box and I'm going to say, okay, now I have 7 times 6, which is 42, and now I only have 1 0 because there's no 0 with 6. Then I move over and I go here and I have 4 times 3 is 12, and I have 1 0 that I'm going to add to the product. And then in the last square, I have just 6 times 3. There aren't any zeros, and that's just 18. Now, the reason that we do this is because it kind of simplifies the problem down into basic math facts. The problem here is now you have to take the time to add them up. So along the side, we need to make sure all of our place values are lined up correctly. And we're going to add these together, and we have 8, 5, 12, 13, and we have 3,358. So let's do one more of these together. We have 84 times 19. So again, we're going to draw a big rectangle, and then we're going to split that rectangle so we have 4 smaller rectangles. And once again, the 84 and the 19, it doesn't matter what side they go on. I'm going to do the 84, and the 19 is the same thing as 10 and 9. And then I say, okay, I have 8 times 1 is 8, and then I have 2 zeros. It's the biggest box to remind you that it's going to be the biggest number. Then if I go to the next section, I have 4 times 1, which is 4, and then I have a 0 that I need to add. I'm going to go to the next box, and again, the order doesn't matter, and I have 8 times 9 is 72, and then I'm going to add the 0, gives me 720. And then the last one, I just have 4 and 9, and that gives me 36, and there's no zeros. So if you look again, you're taking and bringing these two together, and then you're taking these two together, these two together. I'm going to switch colors one more time. And then these two together, just like you do with your multiplication table. Of course, we still have to now take our big numbers here, the ones that ended up in our rectangles, and we need to add those together, which is 800, 720, 40, 36, 789, and we have 1,596. And you'll do the same thing for numbers 3 and 4. I'm going to skip ahead to number 7. Mr. Jackson is taking 23 students to see a movie. Tickets for the movie cost 75 cents. How much money will Mr. Jackson spend on student tickets? First of all, I'd like to know what movie theater he's going to only pay 75 cents. But I drew you a picture again, and it's like saying, okay, here's one person, and this person costs 75 cents. And here's another person, and this student costs 75 cents. And then there's another person, and this person costs 75 cents until you get to 23 times. That's the same thing as saying 75 times 23. we're going to draw our big rectangle again, because this is a skill that we want to practice today, even though we might know a faster way of doing this. And we're going to say, okay, we have 70 and 5, that's the 75 cents for the ticket. And then there were 23 children. We take and we say, all right, 2 times 7 is 14. Add our 2 zeros. Then 2 times 5 is 10, and then we add a 0. Now remember, this is one of those instances that because 5 and 2 is 10, you already have that 0 in the 10. You need to add the additional 0. Then we have 7 times 3 is 21. You have 1 0 here. And then you have 3 times 5 is 15. And now we need to take those numbers and line them up nice and carefully. And I'm just going to take 100 plus 210, and I know that that's 310. It'll save me a step. And then I'm going to add these together. And I get 1,725. Be careful though, because remember the 75 cents equals 0.75 because it's less than $1. So we need to, in our answer, move our decimal point over. So our answer isn't $1,000. That would be ridiculous. Our answer is $17.25. Onward to the remembering side now. It asks us to write the decimal numbers as fractions. Now in these it doesn't ask us to write them in simplest form, so we can just leave them as fractions not in simplest form. If you look here at the first one, we have 0.67. We have to remember we have our ones, our tenths, and our hundredths. Because that's hundredths, we know our answer is 67, and then we just write hundredths. We can also check our answer because we have 2 zeros and we have 2 place values here. So for our second one, we have ones, tenths. So we can say that 3/10 as a fraction is written as 3/10. And again, we have 1 zero and 1 place value over from the decimal point. Number 3 has ones, tenths, hundredths. So we have 8 hundredths. Doesn't ask us to put it in simplest form, but if it did, this is where we know that they, we could either say that they're both even, so we could divide them by 2, or if we knew that we could divide them by 4. But I'm going to pretend I don't know that. And I divide out and I get 4/50. And then I'm going to divide it again by 2. My pen is having trouble here. And I get down to 2/25. But again, it didn't ask us to do that, so we could have just left it like this to begin with. Number 7 tells us that the edge of each edge of this cube is 4 inches long. And because it's a cube, we know that all of them then are going to be 4. Well, area, we know that area equals length times width. So we're just taking the length times the width, which is 4 times 4. So our area is 16 inches squared, or 16 square inches. The volume, tells us here in the next problem, is length times width times height. So we have, for our volume, 4 times 4 times 4, not 14, times 4, which gives us 16 times 4. And then we need to use either our math facts or our multiplication skills and say that, okay, we have 16 times 4 is 64 inches cubed because it's volume. Now number 8 is kind of a tricky one because it's giving us the volume. Again, it's a cube, so each of the sides has to be the same because the faces are squares. So you need to say to yourself, okay, if it's a square, that means my length, my width, and my height all have to be the same number. Well, I know it's not 1 because 1 times 1 times 1 is only 1. And I know it's not 2 because my answer is an odd number. And if I had my volume, or I had my sides as 2s, my volume would be an even number. So I'm just going to keep going up and kind of guessing and checking. So let's say that the length of each edge is 3. So all edges are 3. Let's see how this works out. If I have 3 times 3 times 3, that's 9 times 3, and 9 times 3 is 27. Look at that. It worked out right away. So my length is 3 centimeters, not 3 centimeters squared, not 3 centimeters cubed, it's just the length. So now that I know my length, I can find out my area, because again, my area is length times width. So all I have to do is say, oh, 3 times 3, and that gets me to 9 centimeters squared. This last one is probably the trickiest one, because it's telling us that the area, which remember is length times width, the area is 4, and I need to figure out the length and the width. Again, because it's a cube, each side has to be the same. So the length and the width have to be the same number. Again, I know it's not 1 because 1 times 1 is 1. So if I try 2, and I say, okay, 2 times 2, because it's a square, they have to be the same. 2 times 2 is 4. So the length of each edge is 2 feet. My volume then, again, is length times width times height. The length, the width, and the height of a cube are going to all be the same. They're all going to be 2. So I have 4 times 2. 4 times 2 is 8. So my volume is 4 feet cubed, or 4 cubic feet.